Dr. Cynthia Navarro. Her topic is import replacement commodities to increase Hawaii's agricultural production.
Hi, aloha. Thank you for having me. It's nice to actually be here this time. Last year I was Zooming in, so it's nice, and I hope to get to talk to everybody, especially if there's florists in here. Part of the project is definitely connecting with florists, and it's, as Tessie mentioned, it's an integral part of making sure that these new germplasm and new cultivars that we want to bring, to be able to bring them out into the market, that we have the support of the florists. So I wanted to talk about the reason, Tessie mentioned, so I'm part of the Hawaii Department of Ag new germplasm grant that Tessie mentioned, the first one. And basically about a year ago, so I attend the board meetings for HFNA, and we were talking about import replacement, and Eric was like, well, we should just go down to plant quarantine and find out what are their top rejects. What are they sending back? And I said, okay, I'll go down. I had a connection there at the Maui plant quarantine right near the airport, and so we went down there to. It was actually perfect timing because they were having an open house for their plant quarantine. So he was like, oh, I'll give you the whole tour, and basically, what's come out is that the import of plants for landscaping, for cut flower, and propagation, it's a very high risk pathway for pests and diseases, and so there's a lot of burden on these plant quarantine folks to really be able to keep these things out, and endangering both our environment and our economy too, because introduction of these pests can be detrimental for our environment, but it can also add a financial burden to growers if suddenly they are quarantined, or they need to add measures to prevent the export of these pests and diseases. So what I want to look at for this particular project on Maui and statewide is to evaluate and provide cut flower and foliage cultivars, which will be grown locally, disease-free, and mostly as a replacement for high-risk materials that are currently being imported by the cut flower and foliage industry. So going back to the story where I went down to the plant quarantine, basically, I compiled this list. It's 2 pages, but I compiled this list from both going down there and actually talking with them, and then also going onto websites and finding out what things had been rejected via growers, giving insight as to what had been rejected, and then also there's a listing on the HDOA site as well. So the ones that are bolded, those were then ones that were emphasized at the quarantine. Those were the things that they were telling me were a problem. It's not quite coming out on the screen, but the ones that are dark green, I guess you can kind of see it, the sunflower, those are the ones that we are going to be choosing for this project. And basically, it was really hard. There's lots of things to choose from, but you have to, at some point, narrow it down. And basically, I went on flowers that I felt had a potential here to be a cut flower that we can produce here in Hawaii and that can be marketed in the local market, and that in the past just hasn't really been developed. So we went with sunflower, hydrangea, and then the Myrtaceae family of plants. I'll go into it in the next slide, but there was an existing grant in 2012 where Myrtaceae plants of various genus and species were brought in because of the issues with ohia rust. And so we have some existing cultivars, and so we want to build on those cultivars that we've already brought in. Okay, so the existing import replacement cultivars that we have are mostly in the Myrtaceae family. There's a few. Let's see if I have it. And here's the list. This is what we're left with. Basically, I'm not sure when the grant was written because it was my predecessor that was doing the grant, but because of the issue with ohia rust, it was like 2007, the ohia rust kind of, it became big news. That was the biggest threat to ohia at the time. Of course, now we have rapid ohia death. But the concern was that they were noticing that that the rust, which is actually called guava rust, was jumping to other Myrtaceae. They even found it on eucalyptus. And of course, in this flyer that went out by the DOA, the bottom picture shows just rose apple, our naturalized rose apple, just being severely affected and in decline and dying due to this rust. So there was this real concern that we needed to stop importing Myrtaceae plants, and we needed to actively try and grow Myrtaceae here locally to meet the cut flower and foliage. So most of these are Myrtaceae. There are a few that they are being grown at the Maui Agricultural Research Center. Unfortunately, I don't remember how large the original set was, but unfortunately, many of them have been lost. The funding ran out or wasn't renewed, and so Pam Shingaki has been basically maintaining these cultivars for the past several years without any funding, and so we did lose some to disease. Some got really old, and so they kind of need some rejuvenation, and we'll need to look to see whether we can continue working with them. But they were never formally evaluated. So this is a really good opportunity to look at vase life and to look at some other cut flower qualities. So the two that I really want to focus on, though, are the Camelicium and the Leptospermum cultivars, because those make up the majority of the Myrtaceae. And also they are what's kind of, when you read the literature on woody perennials for cut flower, they're kind of like things you should try, or the up and coming type. And the challenge on the mainland with growing these is that they're pretty much limited to Mediterranean-like climates. So there's not a lot of places that they can grow. They do grow them in California, but there's some potential there for us to be able to grow it here. They both have some small evergreen leaves and these profusion of flowers that really make them nice for fillers. The Camelicium is, the common name is Geraldton wax. It has many, many hybrids. I believe we have 2 hybrids. There's actually a few more, the Camelicium. We're just going to have to determine whether we can include them. Pam was very conservative when I asked for the list of the plants. So we have the My Sweet 16 and the Purple Pride. And then the Leptospermum scoparium, the tea tree, that's from New Zealand. It's very similar to Camelicium in how it looks and how it can be used in a floral arrangement. It actually might have better potential because it does better in higher humidity. So we'll see how that responds. But here's some pictures of some of these 2 cultivars, the basic common ones. So you can see the little flowers and the nice glossy green leaves. So that moves us on to the new cultivars that I mentioned due to our visit down to the plant quarantine. So I picked sunflower also because it was an annual. So we knew that we could, in the 3-year time of the project, we could get several growths of the plant. It's easy to grow. You can direct seed it. There's a potential for year-round growth. Richard Criley did a study in 2007. He did it with his students. And I actually talked to him about it, and he's like, yeah, we should definitely replicate that and expand that again, because there was some potential for growth year-round with the sunflower. I don't know if many of you heard, but sunflower is also being grown in Maui in former sugarcane land. They're growing it for biofuel. So it is a flower that's quite popular right now. Speaking of, I guess, nature, I've had pictures of friends at their wedding, and they're all holding sunflowers as part of their bridal bouquets. So very popular plant, and there are so many cultivars that are currently being developed for sunflower. It's very hard to choose which ones we want to do. But basically, I want to try and capture the different attributes that are out there for cut flower sunflower, which we have the single stem. So this is quickest to bloom, longest vase life. You're going to want to control for size of the flower, basically on how tight you grow them. Of course, I want to work with florists to find out what that optimal size is, because you can't have a huge flower that outweighs everything else, right? And then you also have branch. These tend to form smaller flowers, but you get more abundant flowers per plant. And then what's really exciting is they have pollenless types. Most of actually the ones for all the cut flower are pollenless, which really helps with people if they have allergies, and also just the physical mess that pollen can make. There's also day-length neutral varieties now, which adds to the potential for being able to grow throughout the year. And this is a plant that definitely you would want to plant successionally so that you could get a continuous crop. So these are some cultivars I'm looking at. There's a sun-rich orange, which does really well in the south, so it can tolerate some higher humidity. There's also the pro-cuts, and there's the bicolor I just like because it's a nice, interesting color combination. But there's a pro-cut orange and there's a pro-cut lemon too that we're considering. And I believe we're trying to also redo some of the cultivars that Criley did in his study as well. These are some of the branching types, which there's so many, and it's amazing how many colors now they're breeding with the sunflowers. They really can range from bright yellows, lemony yellows, almost cream yellows, to these dark reds, browns, really capturing that whole range of colors. So there's a Florenza and the Jade that were interesting, just because I was basically in the catalogs that I've been looking through, I'm looking for good stem quality, and also if they do well in the south, because there's really no comparison, right, for Hawaii. So I'm trying to go with basically ones that do well in the south with that high humidity. And for this, we will be, I want to grow them down in Kahului as well, up in Kula, to see if we can get some differences in how they grow in those two different areas. And then the last one is Hydrangea. This is a woody perennial. When I went to plant quarantine, one of the things that I think her name is Diane or Carol, I can't remember. But anyway, what she's telling me is we ruin a lot of weddings when they have to send all this stuff back. And she's just like, she just almost cries when she has to send back all these beautiful hydrangeas because of a fungal disease or a pest that they find on it. I was most interested in hydrangea because at that time they were blooming up country. I've also seen them blooming up in Kona. So we have macrophylla here. It does very well. It produces quite large mop heads, the large floral inflorescence. But it's really never been evaluated for cut flower. I couldn't find anything. So if anybody has any information or research that maybe wasn't published, or just has some maybe anecdotal stuff, I'd be very interested, because for Hawaii, I haven't been able to find anything for using hydrangea as a cut flower. But just in terms of woody perennials, this is a standby. It's a mainstay in the cut flower industry to have hydrangeas. And these two pictures are taken from Maui, and a friend who made a bouquet with the hydrangea. So this will definitely be one of the cultivars that we bring in, is the Hydrangea macrophylla, or big leaf hydrangea. It goes by mophead, or hortensia is another name. And they can come in colors of white, pink, or blue. These are the ones that are influenced by the pH of the soil. Mostly you just see blues in Hawaii. I see some hues of pink, but mostly the blue and the white. The challenge with the hydrangea is that the flower buds form on last year's wood. So you can imagine when you're pruning, you have to be very careful when you prune, or you won't get your next year's crop. So on the mainland, this is a challenge, especially with frost and everything else. But here, it'll be interesting to see what happens. Like, when and where are those flower buds forming, and when is the best time to prune these? Because what you want to do is prune them down so you can get some nice long stems coming up. There are also some new cultivars. They're called remontant or reblooming, and they actually form flower buds on the new year, on this year's wood. So they're actually a little bit more flexible. And again, I just think it's an opportunity for us to see how these do in Hawaii. So here are some pictures of some macrophylla. This all summer beauty, it's comparable to endless summer is another one. Those are these reblooming ones. They form on the new wood. They're very popular. And then blushing bride is another one that I was looking at. Pam is really like strict with me on like, don't go overboard and get too many. So I have to be really strict about how many I grow. The other two cultivars that we're looking at in terms of hydrangea, there's a Hydrangea arborescens. A very popular cultivar is Annabelle. Some of the challenges with this is the stems can be weak, so I really want to look for strong-stemmed hydrangeas. Most hydrangeas do well in the south, so I'm hoping that they'll also do well here. And Annabelle is a popular one in the south. Again, that flowers on old wood, so we'll have to look at that. And then there's the Hydrangea paniculata. This is another hardy species. It's got cone-shaped flowers, kind of very unique. A popular cultivar was called Limelight, and it was kind of like a very light green, and it was very popular with florists. So yeah, here's your Limelight, very pretty. And then this one I thought was interesting. This is Arborescens Incredible, very intense white. Although now I'm thinking, now that Tessie said that, I should be looking for maybe some blush hydrangeas too to include in there. So those are those two. And then, of course, it's fun to grow the plants and everything, but that doesn't mean anything unless it translates into getting the growers to grow them, and then having the florists have that demand to build that demand for the growers to grow them. So as part of this project, we'll be doing a needs assessment, and mostly I'm focused on, because we've already kind of selected the cultivars already, mostly what I'm going to be focused on with this needs assessment is how can we improve that pathway from grower to florist, that market pathway, so that growers can feel confident in adopting these cultivars, knowing that there'll be a market for them. So that, for me, this is a really important part. And also having collaborative workshops. I was so sad that I missed the florist workshop I believe that was in August, right? And hopefully we can have some more. I'd like to bring some florists up to the Maui Agricultural Research Center too, to do some just field evaluations of the Myrtaceae that we have up there, as well as when we start getting the sunflowers and the hydrangea going. It's their feedback and those connections that we make, that the growers and the florists make, that will enable adoption of these cultivars. And just what I wanted to just mention here is that, farm to table is huge, right? I mean, we all know that that's the up and coming thing, or it's already the thing with vegetable growers. Field to vase is the thing happening now with flowers, and we should really we have so many events going on in Hawaii. We have certainly a lot of weddings. I definitely feel that we have a strong opportunity to do, to strengthen our field to vase movement here in Hawaii. And so I'd like to use these cultivars to be able to support that. So with that, mahalo, and if there's any questions. Yeah, Johnny.
Do you have a list of resources where we could go to call if we want to order?
Yeah, so I'm working with the sunflowers. Probably won't be a problem. The hydrangea, I'm still working out. I'm working with a company called Hydrangea Plus and some other growers. The challenge is shipping those plugs to Hawaii. So right now I'm in the midst of trying to order those plugs, because it will be another 2 years before we get the flowers production going on that. So I need to get those planted as soon as possible.
For the sunflowers?
For the sunflowers, I'm hoping to do a winter planting down in Kahului. So I can share with you the contacts that I have for the sunflowers. And then in the spring, I'll probably do hopefully another planting in Kahului, and also one in Kula. But the winter one, I wanted to see if I could just capture in Kahului, because it's warmer down there. So we'll see. Yeah.
So when picking your limited number of varieties, are you considering what the sunflowers look like with the anthurium and the orchids?
That's a great, yeah. It's
That's
a
kind of a hideous thought for me. These beautiful orchids and anthurium.
right. You know, I know I've heard of it. It's kind of like the fusion. You know, we talk about food and fusion. I think this is now the fusion of flowers, right? The tropical. I think I've also heard it called soft tropicals, right? I hadn't considered, just because we just want to see what. I mean, this is like the first step in trying to evaluate these species for here. So I was trying to go with the winners, the one that when you know you can grow, probably will have the least amount of pest and disease problems, the one that you know you have a market for, that florists already are using. I think working with florists, though, if they want to add them into combination, we can certainly, you know, that can certainly bolster it. But yeah, I mean, sunflowers, they definitely have a unique and strong personality to them. So, but I think hydrangeas might be something that can be integrated.
Are very pretty.
Yeah, so they might be able to be integrated in a soft tropical type arrangement. Like I said, if there are any florists here, let's, I would definitely like to get together and can have a workshop. So, yeah.
Would the rejection rate, would the flowers rejected in Maui differ from what would be rejected on Hawaiian Island or Oahu?
It might be. There might be some island differences. So certainly being able to get more information about those quarantine lists, they're kind of hard to get. So I don't know, maybe Sharon, maybe you can help out with, I found that just going down there and talking to them, that's how I was able to pull the information.
It might skew what you're,
True.
what you're trying to do.
Because I'm an agent on Maui, that's where I went. But yeah, I can certainly see how there would be island differences. So, Eric?
How much do you know, Cynthia, of field to base? And then second is, we are at our next HFNA meeting on October 19th. We have Rita Jo Schultz of Alaska Peony. She'll be a guest speaker
Yeah.
at the board meeting.
Excellent.
She's going to speak from CCFC on American Growth. She will bring up the subject about field to base that they support.
Right.
Statewide. And they're wanting Hawaii to join.
Oh, excellent.
Right
Excellent.
now, there's no one from Hawaii that is part of that movement yet.
Okay. I learned about it through the American, the cut flower, Specialty Cut Flower Growers Association, sorry. Just being part of that organization, I learned about that's how they've been driving their flowers, is this, this field to vase, kind of copying the farm to table movement and building those relationships so that you kind of like the small vegetable farmers will find a chef that they will work closely with, or several chefs. The same idea is then you're working directly with florists. I think some of the challenges in Hawaii, we don't, like on Maui, we don't have a wholesaler like Watanabe Floral on Maui. So how do we do that for areas where we don't have a Watanabe Floral? Because a Watanabe Floral could certainly assist in that, but how does that work for areas where we may not have that? And I certainly want to be in communication with Watanabe too to find out how we can better support that local flower to vase movement. So yeah, I'm definitely intrigued on learning more, because I think that's where sunflower and hydrangea will fall. Oh.
Question. Oh, sorry. Are there pests or diseases that need to be considered in, cultivation?
There will be for the sunflower. For myself, I thought a lot about this one, how I'm going to grow them, and I do have some concerns, especially at the Kula station. We've lost a lot of plants to some root diseases. So I'm actually going to focus on growing these things in containers to evaluate the floral attributes. Then once we've really identified the ones that we really want to grow, then I'll expand more into the actual field-grown conditions, because I think that's where the challenges are going to come about, especially like density of plantings, relative humidity of where you're growing things. That's where you're going to have most of your issues. Hydrangea, I'm just not sure, because like I said, I can't find a lot of research for it in Hawaii other than people growing it in their backyards as a landscape plant. So like I said, if there's any information about, there is, you'll see, I've observed hydrangea with some modeling on the petals. But then again, I don't know if those were just because they're outside and they're not being grown for cut flower. You would actually cut the hydrangea sooner than when it fully opens for cut flower. So there may be some management strategies that you could utilize to reduce the pest and disease problems. Yeah.
Recognizing that we do import some of these hydrangeas and sunflowers, do we have any idea that, in terms of what the demand for it might be? Again, from a grower standpoint, how do you allocate resources to invest in a particular crop without knowing what the potential market size might be?
Right. And so that's why the needs assessment will be very important for determining that and for filling in the gaps of that information. I don't know if you remember, but Tessie said that the RFP for this came out in November. We had to have it by December. So it was a very short turnaround for us to make the proposal. So I realized there's a lot of things that if we had had the time and knew that this was coming about, we could have prepared for and found out more information. So there will be some kind of, back end having to go back. But from the florists that I've talked to and growers that I've talked to, there is a lot of interest, particularly in the hydrangea. I talked to several growers, especially with Protea on decline on Maui. They're thinking about other woody perennials. So I think some of the Myrtaceae and even some of the hydrangea might be some nice substitutes. But again, we would need to determine, we need to find out what the value, hydrangeas tend to have a high value on the mainland if you're selling hydrangea. That's why a lot of growers grow them. But we would need to find that out here too. So, yes, Eric.
Maybe last question, but you mentioned Protea is on decline on Maui. In the marketplace right now, we're having to buy California right now because Protea is not available even on Maui. Why are our growers not taking advantage of the market when you see a King Protea in a bridal bouquet now? When you see Protea used in a lot of arrangements now.
There's been a lot of consolidation in Maui. So a lot of the small growers just don't grow it, or they keep it, but they're not the main production. And so there was a lot of consolidation in the Protea growers. I think it's also a reflection that we have an aging farmer population. I think that we all know that that's kind of this elephant in the room is our aging farmers. Do we have enough new farmers? And a lot of new farmers are excited about growing food. Do we have new farmers excited about growing flowers? And I'm glad you asked that question because I think the field to vase movement is a way to really energize maybe some young farmers to get into the floral production and cut flower business as well.
That's the sexy part.
Yes, exactly. So, and there's a lot of, on the mainland, there's a lot of research about doing it organically, so you don't necessarily, there's ways that you could choose to do different management strategies. But I think the key is just getting that information out there. Just an aside, the sunflowers that Pacific Biodiesel is growing in Maui, they actually had to put up signs because people were literally stopping in the middle of the highway, taking their kids out to go into the sunflower field, and they were picking sunflowers. These aren't even sunflowers for cut flowers, they're being produced for biodiesel, so they're the huge heads, right? And you just see people walking out with these flowers. So I think sunflowers are just kind of one of those things everybody, you know, I think there's always kind of that built-in demand with sunflowers. So anyway, thank you very much. Thank you.